Ars gratia artis. Art for art's sake. Heck of a motto. Not a lot of businesses get to survive for 100 years. A business that outlasts anyone that created it. Not exactly a small endeavor. Once upon a time. It is here that I will sift through the grit to uncover the heart of our story. Why, it's the theater chain Lowe's, owned and operated by Marcus Lowe. Back in the early 1900s, movie theaters owned and operated movie studios for exclusive rights to both the pictures and actors. But how could the heart of a movie production studio be in business with a theater chain? Did antitrust laws preventing monopolies from forming not even exist yet?
Ho ho ho! Well there, Mikey, I am Filmy, the film guy. And I'm here to tell you no! We were still figuring it out. Off I go!
Well, that was weird. I want to find the heart of the MGM story and tell you what has happened to the studio since. What has it grown into, so to speak? What it became, and what it means to push the company into a second century. Not a thing a lot of companies get to do. MGM as we know it was founded in 1924, but the heart of our story actually begins in 1899. America is completing its first end-to-end whole-ass century of existence, but I'm here to celebrate something else. Parades and trumpets sound for the birth of one Irving G-Unit Thalberg on this blessed day in 1899. Irving is my hero in every artistic and creative way, although problematic in interpersonal relationships and politics at times. He was effective at marrying both the art and business of filmmaking in a way that I admire. Here's Groucho Marx, frequent collaborator with Irving Thalberg.
Because he never had any fun, Thalberg. He played bridge with Harpo at night, but that was about his only fun he had. He built a home on the beach and had it soundproof so we couldn't hear the waves. He's a very eccentric man. This is true.
Irving is a boy born with complications, infant methylglobinemia to be entirely specific, but in layman's terms, a congenital defect that limits the amount of oxygen that will reach the heart of a human body, a defect that will ultimately claim Irving's life. And this is why I want to underline why he's my film, art production, what have you hero. As a baby, his parents were told he'd reach 20, at best 30. He spent large stretches of his youth immobilized in bed. Rheumatic fever at 17, hospitalized and bedridden for a year straight. This pushed the possibility of college entirely out of Irving's reach. I think drive is born in moments like this.
Don't ever tell me what I can't do, ever!
Irving Thalberg was disabled with a congenital health defect, and he just rolled into Hollywood like he was like, yeah, I'm taking this over. Hello, my name is Irving. Oh, I'm sorry.
Game, respect, game.
He gets a job as a secretary at Universal in mid-1918 in New York City, and then works his way up to be the secretary for the head of the entire studio, Carl Laemmle. Everyone is still trying to figure out this whole movie business thing and whether or not there was one right now. Irving convinces his head of the studio that they need a studio manager and outlines a position for the job Irving knew they needed. This is a position that Carl Laemmle immediately attempts to hire Thalberg for. And before you say, no duh, Irving is 20 years old right now. He is a frail whisper of a man, but even then, Hollywood could see it. He becomes the person that shapes the business in many ways moving forward, including of executives finding ways to limit the power of creatives when infinite, unsustainable growth is on the line. Keep that line moving on up, please. This story is every story. Which is also kind of the point of this piece. Hollywood has not changed. They just got better at burying bodies. The drive behind Irving was simple. He was to tell as many stories in the time he had as he could, knowing there was a ticking clock behind it, in a medium and business that just started to exist as a for real thing. Quick, make some studios and production houses! He understood that having a business that maintained an audience that would finance the next story was the entire whole ballgame. I have been harping on the treacherous intersection of art and commerce in the film business, but Irving really sees this like no one else at the time. Or maybe ever, honestly. This job ensures that there is a next job. Industries and studios evolve. But let's bring the Los Theater chain back into the fold and have ourselves a grand old time. We will see the true start of one of the most storied and accomplished film studios of all time corrupted into something otherworldly and perverse. A question I've asked on this show before that I intend to clearly illustrate in this piece is, how do you keep a business alive for 100 years? Please understand the weight of that statement. The answer to that question is wildly complicated and sort of more than a lot involves slot machines, baby. One business will become many businesses. But right now, it's 1922 and the setting is the bustling streets of New York City. Cue Snowfall. Thalberg is 23 years old and he has been at Universal for 3.5 years. Here we will meet one of our trusty MGMs, Louis B. Mayer. A bit of a theater buff his dang self. Pause. Louis B. Mayer would become MGM's second M. He was born circa 1884 in Belarus and immigrated to North America with his family as a child. In 1907, Mayer opened his first theater, the Orpheum in Massachusetts. Soon, Mayer owns multiple theaters and the exclusive rights to a big movie. I can't wait to find out. Oh, Jesus Christ! Mayer moved to LA and opened his own production studio, Mayer Pictures, in 1918, and 4 years later would be introduced to main character Irving G. Thalberg. Unpause. This was a setup meeting, see if there's a fit here kind of thing. Louis knows, after he meets him, that hiring him is top priority. Thalberg is the head of production at an entire film studio at 20 years old, a firebrand. Wanting to poach Thalberg from Universal isn't new.
But did you know?
Cecil B. DeMille tried to poach Thalberg. Irving is a hot commodity in Hollywood, but these two bonded over a love of slapstick comedy. Of vaudeville, baby! And they were both already in the film business, but that love of vaudeville, it pulls at the heart. Mayer gets to know a young Irving Thalberg over time. In 1924, Thalberg would decide he was ready to part ways with Universal and became the VP of production for Mayer Pictures, mere months before the formation of MGM. It's important to note that Mayer sees something important in Thalberg, even in these first shaky steps out into the world. Succeeding as a business here is going to require people that can see the art and the business at the same time. Filmmaking is balanced when done right. It can't all be art and it can't all be business, a blessed union of art and commerce, wholly its own beast that can be ridden but never tamed and controlled. You could make a case that Irving Thalberg understood this better than anyone ever has. So, the soon-to-be second M is in extremely good standing and good hands. It is here we must shift focus away from the final M and over to the first one. Put on your flip-flops, kids, we're going to Jacksonville. And then quickly to Los Angeles. This business follows Richard Rowland and George Grombacher as they form Metro Studios. Pause. too many people. Metro Studios was formed as a distribution company in 1915 by the aforementioned Roland and Grombecker as president and vice president and Louis B. Mayer as secretary. Hey, that's the guy from before. Metro Studios expanded rapidly and by 1918 moved to Hollywood and established a production studio, at which time Mayer would leave to form Mayer Pictures. Very soon after that, Metro Studios was sold to Marcus Lowe and Roland and Grombecker leave and never become part of MGM, so you can forget them that they ever exist. Bye! Unpause. What is about to happen is important because it will never stop happening, the chain reaction. Once the fish start gobbling each other up, it will literally never stop. Ecosystems be like that, I guess. But one day, of course, the fish get so big that the lake can no longer sustain them. The fish will someday simply get too large to feed and the ecosystem will collapse. And by collapse, I mean all the other fish will be able to eat again and there will be a period of prosperity before the cycle starts all over again. And I'm going to show you the whole cycle here. So I guess get prepared to see some metaphorical fish guts. That metaphor got away from me, I'm sorry. To properly illustrate the absurdity of Hollywood, let's talk about the G in the middle. Are you kidding? There's too many guys. Goldwyn Pictures was founded in 1916 by Samuel Goldfish and the Selwyn brothers. Goldwyn. Though Samuel would later change his surname to Goldwyn. In 1923, Samuel left Goldwyn Pictures to form Samuel Goldwyn Productions, a different production company, and 1 year later Goldwyn Pictures was acquired by Lowe in an effort to strengthen Metro Pictures' rather weak film productions.
But did you know?
Although Lowe included Samuel's name as a founder of MGM, he was never involved in the company in any capacities. You can forget about him too. Goodbye! Goldwyn Pictures is where the lion comes from. That's Leo. They're a moderate success, but that lion trademark, hubba hubba bazinga! Back to Lowe's buying up all the companies through the 1920s to have movies to play in their theaters. Lowe's is just buying supply. And the supply, in their words, not mine, was lackluster. Both Goldwyn and Metro Studios' output was struggling, and this was true even post-merger. This is a complicated business problem. You own two film studios, but now their problems are just multiplying each other in its newly fused form. When you buy companies, you also buy their debt. If you buy a lot of them, that could add up quickly. They needed a business solution to put entirely too fine a point on it, saw the need to make a product that audiences would actually want while investing in the price of creating entertainment. Gosh, that sounds like a banger. Producer is really the missing piece. Oh, I see. Okay. What's substantive framing, Michael? Well done, me. When Goldwyn Pictures Incorporated, aka a real big business boy, the secretary on the papers was Louis Mayer, baby. Fancy seeing you here, Louis. Lowe's notes where Mayer is strong and their current studios are less strong. A theme you will see pretty consistently in Hollywood. Do what they do, but better and cheaper, okay? But I think more directly and 12 times more importantly, buying Mayer gives you access to the most powerful film producer of all time, Irving Thalberg. Lowe's bought Mayer Pictures for $75,000. I will say again, from this moment on, it will never stop happening. The fish just got bigger and the science of mergers gets hilariously even more imperfect. But Lowe's is seeing something else. The grand idea at the end of this imperfect experiment, Metro, Goldwyn, Mayer, a brand subsidy of Lowe's cinema. Thalberg and MGM produced films that people wanted to see because there was powerful stories pushing the imagination of audiences to new heights and showing that a business was possible and even lucrative when, key underlined point here, people wanted to go to the movies. Okay, so just to recap, it's early 1924 and Marcus Lowe owns a theater chain and 2 film production studios, Metro Studios and Goldwyn Pictures, which he is planning to merge into one studio. For the sole purpose of producing films for the Lowe's theater chain, they need a producer and Louis Mayer is their guy, so they add his company along with main character Irving Thalberg into the fold. And on April 17th, 1924, MGM is officially born. And speaking of main character Irving, I want to shift back to disability here because Irving was not born in a body that could live up to his brain and his heart. Like, he's a big reason we figure out the film business at all. Irving Thalberg was made VP of Production day 1 at newly formed MGM and had his first major medical lapse from a heart attack, making Ben-Hur a tale of the Christ. One of the earliest examples of development hell. Irving Thalberg is absolutely the guy that saved this picture. What's funny about this film in particular is that it sets all kinds of earnings records at the company, but was also a financial loss at the time, a pretty significant $700,000. But hey, movie math is not real, and they're just gonna zhuzh it all up for a re-release. Ben-Hur, upon re-release, is now a paltry but profitable $80,000 in the black, baby. Even when they stumbled, they still found a way to finish the race. And on the subject of racing, I absolutely do not want to gloss over the fact that this production was inhumane to horses. The treatment of animals on Hollywood sets leaves something to be desired even to this day, but that's a topic for a different video. Irving Thalberg pioneered the art of production as we know it today. Fighting to make a business isn't greedy, it isn't selling out, it is forming a basis so lots of people can form a living making art in a for-profit system. Everyone can win. That is literally why this town exists. That is the Hollywood dream. Let's make a product people want with our considerable and interlocking skill sets together. Movies are the coolest thing. I am forever infatuated that they made a business out of art. But Marcus Lowe would not live to see his amalgamation enter the 1930s. He passed in 1927 from a heart attack at age 57. The early days of MGM are magical because they are right there at the center of it, helping this group of misfits figure it out and try to make real businesses out of this wild and crazy idea. But Irving Thalberg saw something that no one else did and managed to control the beast better than most that would come after him, oftentimes at the expense of his own health. By 1933, Thalberg had worked himself near to death and was forced to take some time off work to recover after his second major heart attack. The leadership seized it as an opportunity to safeguard the company against putting too much centralized power in an entity that was currently out of commission. He was removed as head of production of the studio, and his relationship with Mayer deteriorated. Thalberg was used to doing it all himself because, not for nothing, the entire Hollywood experiment was figuring out how to do it. No one knows what they're doing. He almost died, and the company literally restructures itself after his health issue, and he still went back to work and continued producing absolute bangers. Up until his last picture, Irving Thalberg fought for the art and science of cinema as the most influential and meteoric force at MGM. The sport of it. There's agencies, there's managers, you have so much to navigate as a good producer that the audience will never see, and that's the job more than anyone watching films truly realizes. Seeing the painting but never losing track of the cost of paint. Maybe this is an easier way to understand it. Hurting artists is not the easiest thing in the world, but don't take my word for it. Just ask literally any artist you know. Romeo and Juliet would be his final picture he would live to see released. He died the day of the premiere in 1936. Those 6 additional films he produced would be released posthumously, with the final picture being Marie Antoinette. I like to think that Irving made art that was important to him because he knew his time on this earth was limited. Make all of the things you want to in your heart before you just can't anymore. He lived his whole life by this credence. And the hole Thalberg left is not just with MGM, and even not just with the nascent film industry as a whole. Thalberg leaves a hole in time that I would say has still not been filled. The film industry and certainly MGM never truly recover. I mean this creatively. Irving G. Thalberg, absolute legend, and huge shoes to fill if this MGM company is going to be a long-term success. Oh, funny you should say that, Michael, because... The 1930s was a troubling time. End sentence. The stock market crashes right as the 1920s come to a close, and then we had a worldwide economic disaster leading to the largest armed conflict the world has ever known. But for MGM, the 1930s was a period of growth and prosperity. Remember, Thalberg is still alive during most of this decade. They were the only movie studio to remain profitable during the Great Depression, despite being the last major studio to adopt the breaking technology known as, sound. MGM's first full-fledged talkie was The Broadway Melody, released in 1929 and produced by Irving Thalberg. It was a major success, grossing $4.4 million against a $379,000 budget. This film was the first talkie to win an Academy Award for Best Picture and MGM's first award for Best Picture ever. I think it's safe to assume MGM took this success as a sign because the 30s dawn and suddenly MGM is in love with the musical. MGM really went for it in the 30s, producing almost 50 films a year during that decade. The goal was to release a film every week in a Lowe's theater because film studios made exclusive deals with theater chains to show their movies back then. A studio would sign stars to the roster, bolstering the film studio and the theater business. And MGM wasn't the only studio to cross-pollinate. Paramount was doing the exact same thing. I promise antitrust laws will show up eventually. In the early 1930s, MGM would start running cartoon shorts before their films, a thing that was popularized by Disney. They eventually opened their own animation division, Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Cartoon Studio, to produce their own cartoons in 1937.
But did you know?
Beloved animated duo Tom and Jerry were born at MGM as theatrical shorts. Their fathers, William Hanna and Joseph Barbera, met and got their start at MGM's cartoon studio. Audiences loved the cartoon shorts, but the 30s box office is mainly driven by stars. Stars like Clark Gable, Jean Harlow, Greta Garbo were all signed to MGM, and that meant butts in the seats, especially during such a transitional period for film after the loss of the heart of the studio, Irving Thalberg. MGM was just about the only major movie studio that was making good decisions in this decade, unlike the rest of the studios, who were literally buying film ranches and large money sinkholes that mostly weighed down a balance sheet during an extremely technologically lush period. They also implemented money-saving strategies like reusing old sets, props, and costumes. Thalberg was removed from his head of production role by the studio in 1932 just to put the fact back in your head. He's dead by 1936. It's said that at the time of Thalberg's passing, one executive told another the studio wouldn't feel the aftermath of his death for 2 years.
Foreshadowing.
In 1937, you see Mervyn LeRoy step into Irving Thalberg's gigantic shoes as head of production at MGM. He previously made his name directing movies that were profitable for Warner Brothers. Ominous. In his first couple years at MGM, he produced some smaller, modest films before The Wizard of Oz, baby! What would be anyone's magnum opus, based on the lovely children's book by L. Frank Baum. Leroy was the one that convinced Thomas Mayer, still very much head of the studio, to take a chance here. Immediately after completing The Wizard of Oz, Mervyn LeRoy realized his heart wasn't in producing and decided what he really wanted to do was direct. He took a pay cut to become a director, and that was the end of his career as head of production. Goodbye! MGM closed out the transitional 1930s with Gone with the Wind, and it seemed like there was a light at the end of the tunnel. Which brings us to the 1940s. MGM made a bad bet by stabbing Irving Thalberg in the back at his lowest point, in favor of them making a safe, secret cabal of senior producers calling all the shots at MGM. The new Thalberg is a machine that says no to everything that wasn't considered safe on paper. The brand new New York executive office was the one calling the shots. At least for now, it's a cabal on a different coastline. This led to innumerable sequels and just unsalted boiled chicken at the box office. The theater was a struggle for MGM during the 40s, insisting that safety in a business that was barely formed would lead to stability in the long term. As Hollywood will show you for the next 80 years, they always default to this strategy and they're always wrong. Time is a flat circle, and the 40s were mostly uneventful at MGM, safe releases with medium returns. The boildest! In 1938, an ad was published in The Hollywood Reporter that would later become known as the box office poison ad. It basically criticized the amount of money big-time stars were earning at the time and said it was harming the film industry as a whole. It resulted in MGM terminating the contracts of Greta Garbo, Norma Shearer, coincidentally Thalberg's widow, Joan Crawford, Jeanette MacDonald, and Myrna Loy in 1942, clearly believing some tectonic shift within the industry was about to take place. You know? I guess they called that one. Around this time, the landmark antitrust case, United States versus Paramount Pictures, was brewing, which would ultimately cause a tectonic shift in the film industry as a whole. As the largest studio, Paramount Pictures was the main defendant in the case, but 8 other production companies were named in the lawsuit, including MGM. These studios were being sued by the US Department of Justice because, as it turns out, a handful of people running film studios that own all the producers, actors, writers, and movie theaters makes a monopoly. 1947 would have MGM staring bleakly at ever-declining profits. The following year, the Supreme Court would rule unfavorable to film studios and force them to separate from their theater chains. And with the invention of television, audiences were finding less and less of a reason to visit the theaters, so the pressure was on Louis Mayer to turn this ship around. So buckle up, it's the 1950s. The journey to find a new Thalberg is evolving. It was the directive from executives at MGM. As the 50s roar to life, MGM is limping along and is barely maintaining profitability. Up-and-coming filmmaker from RKO, Isidore Sherry, is named to be the new head of production for the studio. His approach was interesting, recycling sets from older movies, and wouldn't you know it, he's the one that cut Dorothy and Brett Butler loose to save money. His approach was to be less reckless with the studio funds, and as a strategy, it sounded strong. But films produced under his direction didn't amount to much success. MGM's musical division was another story altogether, releasing classics like An American in Paris, Singin' in the Rain, and Seven Brides for Seven Brothers.
Now, do I get that winter underwear? Do I have to come in and take it off you?
Don't listen to her.
Cancelled!
In 1951, Louis Mayer, the studio's leader since its inception, is fired. Big changes indeed. And oops, did we make a monster we can't control? I'm sure it's fine. Mayer's newest Thalberg replacement, Dor Sherry, is named as his replacement. Ouch. Maybe he can control this beast. Oh, spoil. I'm being told he cannot. No. Okay, well, 1 year into Sherry's reign as studio head, Lowe's Inc. would give up control of MGM to comply with the United States versus Paramount ruling. It takes about 5 years to untangle these corporate entities, and both are just burning money the whole time. This was a messy divorce, but when the dust was settled, two separate companies were left standing. Battered and bruised, but still standing. Barely. Things aren't looking that great for MGM. I think it's fair to say that this is around the point where they gave up on the idea of finding a new Thalberg entirely. And of course, in 1956, the New York office fires Sherry too.
You'll be back of the curtain singing, and I'll be out in front doing, like in the picture.
That's right.
What?
You gotta do it, Kathy. This thing is too big.
There's a revolving door of replacement studio heads and infighting for the rest of the decade. Louis B. Mayer attempts and fails at a corporate takeover shortly before his death in October of 1957. MGM finally gets with the times and dips its toes into the deep and scary waters of television in the mid-1950s, experimenting with a documentary-style show called MGM Parade with the main purpose of marketing its movies to a TV audience before opening MGM TV, a new division that would distribute films and produce new shows for television. Around this time, the cartoon division closed. Hanna-Barbera go off to do their own thing. Perhaps you've heard of it. All the while, MGM keeps throwing the musical dart. Despite ever-tumbling box office numbers, try the same thing again. Now it's a negative feedback loop. Bad box office triggers safe executive decisions leading to further bad box office. And somehow, hilariously, they try it again with Gigi. They actually found their big hit. Insanity kind of paid off this one time. They did in fact try the same thing many times. What a way to close out the 1950s. 1959 gives audiences MGM's biggest success in years, and it's just a remake of their old Ben-Hur silent movie from the last section. Ben-Hur, the remake, does great. It sets the Oscar record for number of wins that is not beaten until the movie Titanic comes out. Ben-Hur ultimately makes MGM fall into a spiral that audiences have seen for 80 years. This brilliant brain trust just determined that big budget epics, one released per year, was the way they were going to win going into the 1960s. Okay, that's it. Time is a flat circle. I'm gonna throw. The 1960s, the decade that everyone is gonna release a big epic every year? Yeah. The lesson MGM takes from the Ben-Hur mega success is that they should remake their own semi-profitable films as bold new epics. Cimarron, Mutiny on the Bounty, one of Irving Thalberg's most daring and preposterous productions, producing moving images in a film that will never be replicated practically. It'll look less cool the second time. Robert M. Whiteman is one of the names to stress here. He is named to be the new head of production when the old guard resigns. It is here in the late 60s that MGM will come to a new golden age, if only briefly. 2001, A Space Odyssey, The Dirty Dozen, Where Eagles Dare, and Dr. Zhivago. The president of the studio and Whiteman are forced into resignation because, get ready for this, their ideas to revitalize the company were bad and they should feel bad. Christ, okay, before MGM returned to making good movies again, the thing in the logo, they began in about 1966 to invest in real estate. Did I write that down? Yeah. Which makes an already muddy business model murkier. Well, buckle the fuck up. Edgar Brogman Jr., the very serious business boy, kind of purchases a controlling interest in the company. He comes literally from the Seagram Beverage Company and family. This is 1966 as well. Controlling interest, you say? The following year, Time, yes that one, becomes the second largest shareholder. And in 1969, Vegas real estate mogul Kirk Kerkorian buys 40% of the company from Time Inc., which means as the 60s draws to a close, we need to open up a whole new era of MGM. It's magic carpet time, right, friends? Kirk Kerkorian was born on June 6, 1917 in Fresno, California. His parents were Armenian immigrants escaping horror to Southern California. He subsequently dropped out of school in the 8th grade and became a boxer. Hey, some people are just cool. Kirk becomes obsessed with airplanes going into World War II. It takes over the next couple decades of his life, building a piloting business wholly of his own creation. He flies all over the world, but it is Las Vegas specifically that catches Kirk's eye. Smash cut 1962. Kirk buys 80 acres on the Las Vegas Strip from the Flamingo. This land across the street from the Flamingo is rented from our entrepreneurial friend and becomes, get ready for this, Caesar's Palace. Kirk makes $9 million from this alone. It is the early 1960s, so that is a hell of a lot of money. But Kirk isn't done in Sin City. In 1967, he does it again, but this time, it's record-setting. The largest hotel in the world. What does this have to do with MGM and movies, you ask? Haha, shut up. It is at this point that Mr. Kerkorian sells both previous hotels to the Hilton Corporation. A real pump-up pass, if you will. Spend money, make money. In 1969, he buys the MGM Film Studio. I think it is important to note that a real estate mogul just bought a film studio and built the biggest hotel in the world. A second time, third time, fourth time, I mean, it's hard to. Lost it in a large and deadly hotel fire in 1980 and then built a new largest hotel in the world. Anyway, just cause the old one was gone. Kirk was really focused on the hotel thing. I'd say the MGM Grand, both versions, kind of defines a lot of time at MGM. He is growing the business in a wild new direction. But the hotels use the film library of MGM in creative ways. Not to mention, he was involved in so much of the actual creation of Las Vegas that now MGM is just kind of part of the legacy of making themed destinations designed to suck money out of your bank account like a collapsing sky.
Well, hold on there, Mikey. I think you might have forgot about the films.
Bro, MGM kind of forgot about the films.
Well, what about Soylent Green and Logan's Run and off I go?
In the 1970s, MGM would shift focus away from film entirely, dwindling down film production from 22 movies in 1970 to an average of just 4 releases per year by 1979. As Kerkorian was more focused on hotel development, from day one he appointed James T. Aubrey to be president of the film division almost immediately upon purchase of MGM in 1969. James Aubrey found success in his earlier days producing TV shows like The Beverly Hillbillies and Gilligan's Island. Also, he was the third choice for the role, but he was the first to say it's complicated. Aubrey has a checkered past, to say the least. He was successful for a time as the head of production for CBS, but there's rumors swirling around this guy's kind of uneventful casting off from CBS into the MGM Film Studio spotlight. He also allegedly might have been taking kickbacks from the producers working for him out of production budgets at the studio. CBS, fires him, and he floats around looking for a place to belong, and good old boy Kirk Kerkorian comes a-knocking, offering the president of a major film studio job to someone clouded in controversy. What's the worst that could happen? What? Aubrey's words for what kind of studio he took over was, in shambles. But I'm not sure that Kirk and Aubrey didn't do some shambling of their own. In Aubrey's first week, he canceled 10 in-development TV shows and fired 3,500 employees. He sold the Ruby Slippers in a silent auction and was quoted in the LA Times saying, "To us, they have no value." He gutted the company, selling off much of its real estate, the record label, the prop and costume archive, but also they had their first profitable year in a long while. He was a little too hands-on, especially with the editing process that I know many found quite uncomfortable to work with. Or to be more specific, Sam Peckinpah, not a fan of the Aubrey. In 1971, MGM yet again announces it has built the largest hotel in the world. In 1973, Aubrey resigns. He did do what he set out to do there. His successor is named as Kirk Kerkorian. In 1979, Kirk Kerkorian announced that MGM is now mainly a hotel company. MGM also closed its distribution office and outsourced to United Artists. He also owned a minority stake in Columbia Pictures at the time, and this announcement coincidentally lined up with an antitrust lawsuit filed against him by the Department of Justice. Weird. The court would ultimately rule in favor of Kerkorian. So, yeah, this piece goes all over the place, just like MGM. But alas, in 1981, Kirk Kerkorian announces that they're a film production company yet again. Get used to this start-stop mechanic, but I think more importantly, Kirk realizes he needs to split his business into two businesses: Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer Film Company and MGM Grand Hotels Incorporated. A wise choice, so those two aspects of the business don't compete so openly for resources and attention. MGM Film Co. purchases/merges with United Artists to become MGM UA, a new film distributor. This is somewhat of an ironic fate for UA. The company was founded as a way to give artists control over their own interests rather than relying on a big studio. It was founded in 1919 by Charlie Chaplin, D.W. Griffith, Mary Pickford, and Douglas Fairbanks. And with a mission statement like this, I can only imagine how they would feel to see UA folded into the monstrosity MGM would become. The venture would struggle from the beginning. Funding was limited, and they were only able to produce about 5 pictures per year. United Artists saw some success in the 1930s, but it didn't last long. In the 1950s, under new management, UA became the only production studio to not really produce. They funded independent film projects and rented outside studio space, so they were able to operate with little overhead, making this their strongest decade. The prosperity continued for UA up until 1968, when they were acquired by Transamerica Corporation. After a turbulent decade of ups and downs in the film industry, Transamerica decided it had had enough and sold UA to Kerkorian, which brings us back to MGM.
Someone once told me time is a flat circle.
But most notably during the decade before the MGM merger, UA acquired a 50% stake in Danjaq, which means we need to pause and talk about James Bond. Fine. I felt the need to address the James Bond franchise directly because I care about it and I've talked about it on the show in the past. And also because Bond carried MGM's dead-ass weight on his shoulders for the entire 1980s. Bond wasn't always the sparkling jewel in the MGM crown. MGM just kind of merges into the James Bond franchise when they acquire UA, who owned distribution rights and provided funding to the films via their stake in Danjaq. The first movie MGM is actually involved with is the creation of Octopussy, which is hilarious that a movie from 1983 could get me demonetized in 2024. But hey, the world is stupid. MGM is responsible for the production of the Roger Moore era, the Timothy Dalton gritty rebootquel era, the Pierce Brosnan era, and the Daniel Craig era. Every Bond film released during the 80s was a huge hit, with most of them seeing box office earnings more than 5 times their budget. I propose a scoreboard for the number of times James Bond would save MGM over the coming decades. Ted Turner and Turner Broadcasting made an offer of $1.5 billion to buy the MGM UA library in what would end up being a very messy acquisition. The deal was finalized in March of 1986. Immediately upon purchase of MGM UA, Ted Turner sells the United Artists subsidiary back to Kerkorian for just under $500 million and renamed the MGM half to MGM Entertainment Co. But then, funnily enough, it is MGM's debt that kind of hits the brakes on the whole thing, and the MGM subsidiaries all scattered to the wind as a result of this attempted takeover. Just 6 months later, MGM Entertainment Co.'s production and distribution divisions are then sold back to United Artists, which again was now essentially owned by Kerkorian. The company again became MGM UA with an added Communications Co. for extra flair. Lorimar TV bought the backlots and the studios, and Ted Turner kept all the movies from MGM before 1986. Which means at this point in time, he owns the libraries of RKO Pictures, the old Warner Brothers catalog, and MGM movies before 1986. This is why a lot of the film business was kind of terrified of Ted Turner. He would just buy up large swaths of movies and then alter them irreparably. Where does one even go from here? 1986. Hard to call a thing MGM when you just detonated every aspect of it into an array of a la carte offerings. Spoiler alert, I feel like I've been talking about this for a while, but once you have become too big of a fish for the ecosystem, you start selling off all of the bloat. Deconstruct and reconstruct. These are more cycles than eras, so to speak. The life of a film studio ends when a tech company buys you, and the cycle starts anew. You can't buy all the art because stupid asshole artists are just gonna make more of it. And it's probably gonna comment on the system we currently reside in, like this piece in particular. Art comments on the system. Art can never truly be the system. You cannot own it. You cannot own all of the art. You can try. Hint, hint, hint. It's 1989 and Kerkorian felt like there was still money to be made, and he was going to do it by selling off more pieces of the MGM pie. This is clearly attracting attention, and Kerkorian is listening. Enter Rupert Murdoch. Yes, that one. Rupee just purchased rival Studio 20th Century Fox. He put in an offer for MGM UA, but was outbid by a different Australian broadcasting company called Quintex. However, their attempt to buy would fall through. Ted Turner tries and fails too. In the end, it was an Italian using money from the French bank, that one, that I'm going to call the bank. And they were holding the bag as we enter the 90s. And by bag, I mean a complex and sophisticated leveraging of assets over time, leaving MGM ownership from now and into the future kind of all over the place. But the library of films, as of 1990, end up in the hands of one Italian financier, Giancarlo Peretti. Peretti had previously purchased Canon Films using his Path French studio he also owned. Then he buys MGM and merges MGM into MGM Path. It's only 1990. Get ready for a lot more hyphens. Free tip, movie studios, your brand name shouldn't look like a divorce. Alan Ladd Jr., yes, one of the producers of Star Wars, is brought on to lead the studio into yet another era, the 1990s. Everybody likes Alan. He was also the president of MGM UA once upon a time. Now he's the CEO of MGM. Going back to our Italian friend, this owner maybe kinda over-leveraged all the loans to buy MGM in the first place. And now that umbrella company that was buying up all those beloved studios is undergoing a liquidity crisis. Tell us all last time. Not sure Peretti took this super well because he just fired the whole financial staff, resulting in absolute chaos for all of the artists working for the studio and expecting to get paid. Where have I heard this somewhere before? He also hired his 21-year-old daughter in a high-power financial role. I don't know how that could go wrong. Also, Dan Jack, they're the holding company for James Bond, found out Peretti tried to sell usage rights to other territories without their knowledge. This is further complicated by the fact that this was specifically one of the moves done to secure the loan to buy MGM in the first place. It is lawsuit time! Timothy Dalton was in pre-production on a third James Bond film in the title role. It was called Property of a Lady. But all this madness is so bad that Timothy Dalton exits the role entirely, and James Bond just goes back on ice for a moment. This is a chain reaction. The bank seizes control of MGM Path and reverts it back to MGM. Peretti faced securities fraud charges in the US and Europe. The bank had to undergo a major restructure, and Alan Ladd is let go during this process. That's a lot of drama to pack into 7 months? I don't know how anything got made during this cycle, but somehow 23 movies were released or distributed by MGM between 1990 and 1992. The most critical and commercial success of these releases is probably objectively Thelma and Louise, but in my heart, it's the cutting edge topic.
Oh, shit.
In 1993, MGM Holdings is created to lighten the load on the balance sheet. 1994 gives us Stargate, so really I just want to take this opportunity to thank everyone for coming on this adventure with me. And this fact really makes me happy. Stargate helps them out when they were in dire straits. The bank puts MGM up for sale again in 1996. Bidders from all over the world take part in this feeding frenzy, but it is none other than Kirk Kerkorian that puts in the winning bid. May wonders never cease. As if the 90s weren't already wild and exciting enough, 1997 has just entered the chat. That's the year they buy Metro Media subsidiaries, which include Origins, the Samuel Goldwyn Company from the first 10 minutes of this video, and the MPCA, who produced Dumb and Dumber. James Bond and this acquisition are kind of their biggest asset. So film library acquisition becomes the most important thing to this MGM. 2000, 4000, they end up trading the rights to a Spider-Man film to Sony for the acquisition rights for Casino Royale. Canon had them, so their purchase kind of left MGM with a license it didn't see the value in and didn't need. They were obviously wrong on the Spider-Man value part. Samuel Goldwyn Jr. sues over use of the Goldwyn name, which wasn't even his father's original name. They settle, and MGM changes the Goldwyn Films name to G2. We are now safely in the year 2000. I'm not sure any one person has a clear idea for the direction of this once legendary movie studio. The new millennium begins with MGM cutting ties with their longtime international distribution company and signing with 20th Century Fox. In 2002, Kirk Kerkorian puts MGM up for sale a third time. Let's see what bidders we have this time. Ted Turner! Get out of here, Ted. Next! There we go. To the surprise of nobody, Sony didn't buy MGM because they wanted to return it to its former glory. Heavens, no! They wanted a larger market share for Blu-ray movies by utilizing that sweet, sweet library of 4,000 films. 2002, kids, is a wild time. There was a lot of conflict between MGM and Sony, mainly due to poor performance of DVD sales after Sony became the domestic distributor, which resulted in MGM partnering with 20th Century Fox instead. Sony only held 3 seats of the 13-member board of MGM, and the other 10 board members would ultimately decide that they didn't need Sony at all and exercised a clause to drop them and go independent, an embarrassing blow for Sony. When a lot of people thought MGM was dead and they would never release a film again, they refocused and honestly put a lot of effort to release just the movies they'd already shot. The first of these, "Hey, MGM isn't really dead" films was in fact lucky number 11. But nothing can stop them from consistently restructuring the company and businesses every 4 days. It's not great, but Cabin in the Woods finally gets released, so it's not all bad. Gold star for Cabin in the Woods. The late 2000s would see MGM start several initiatives to enter the digital age, releasing films on iTunes, YouTube, and other digital platforms. They created their own streaming service with a few other distribution companies called Epix, which they bought out entirely in 2016 and renamed MGM Plus in 2022. But overall, MGM continues to spiral through the 2000s, announcing plans to open a theme park in Busan, Korea by 2011. Then it was Seoul, and then they never talked about it again. By 2009, MGM has almost $4 billion in debt sitting on top of them. MGM is spiraling. Every trade under the sun is speculating what kind of bankruptcy they're likely to file. They had over $3 billion of loans maturing by 2012. They were negotiating with creditors to extend deadlines or trade equity for debt relief. In a last-ditch effort, MGM hired Stephen Cooper as the new CEO. He was a corporate executive with experience navigating companies out of bankruptcy. Most notably, he guided Enron through bankruptcy. With his leadership, they were able to negotiate a forbearance agreement, but even then announced that the film Hot Tub Time Machine might be the last film bearing the MGM name and branding. This really looked like it was the end of MGM. In November of 2010, MGM and all 160 of its affiliates would enter Chapter 11 bankruptcy, with a plan to exit bankruptcy and allow their creditors to take over the company. They exited bankruptcy the following month, with Gary Barber and Roger Birnbaum from Spyglass Entertainment becoming co-CEOs. Their first order of business was appointing Jonathan Glickman as president of the film division. Glickman is probably the best thing to happen to MGM in decades. He was the longest serving president since Door Sherry, which provided the studio with some much needed stability. Glickman oversaw production of both Spectre and Skyfall, and he also revived the Rocky franchise with smash hit Creed, which I am kind of a fan. He oversaw the revival of MGM's domestic distribution system, and almost 30% of the directors he hired were women. Good job, Jonathan Glickman. Barber and Birnbaum would both step down as CEOs in 2018 and 2012, respectively. The 2010s were arguably MGM's most successful decade since the Golden Age. They saw profits grow steadily year over year all the way until 2019. And in 2020, I don't think anything happened that year. And in 2020, Glickman announced his departure from MGM in January, but stayed on to finish the production of No Time to Die. Due to the pandemic, MGM delayed production of No Time to Die and laid off 7% of their workforce by April. There's another upper management shuffle. 2020 would see profits plummet from $12.6 billion in 2019 to just $1.1 billion, the lowest earnings since emerging from bankruptcy. And it is December 2020 when they announced they are looking for a buyer again. And in May of 2021, it was announced Amazon would be purchasing MGM and merging it with their production studios to form Amazon MGM Studios. I find it somewhat moving that this powerful lion brand from 1924 still survives to this day. To me, the lion is a symbol of resilience. In November of 2022, Jennifer Salk is appointed as chairwoman and CEO. As far as we can find in the extensive research done for this piece, she is the first woman in a leadership position in the 100-year history of MGM. And then in January of 2024, MGM, Amazon, and Twitch, all technically one entity, laid off hundreds of people. That just happened. That's how a business survives for 100 years. You throw people overboard all the time and pretend you never did. Hollywood is in the business of throwing people overboard to save themselves. Just ask Greta Garbo. In March of 2024, Amazon released a Roadhouse remake to kick off their centennial celebration, because the original Roadhouse was their movie, and that brings us to today, April 17th, 2024. MGM's 100th birthday. I'm going to do a thing I haven't done in a while and focus on mortality. Everything and everyone comes to an end. Me, you, multi-billion-dollar film studios, which brings us back to the title of part 4. If you replace every plank of a ship, is it still the same ship? Is it really still the thing you insist it is after you've sold it and laundered it through so many schemes and dead ends? The houseboat that Thalberg built is starting to show its age, but all businesses do. To survive, they must grow and they must evolve, and eventually sell NFTs. That's the way the world works, kiddos. But I think we're really starting to lose what made Hollywood special. If art doesn't challenge us, what will? Movies should inspire us. They should inspire the people making them too. There isn't really a handbook for how to make a company survive that long, but seriously, if you do, Boeing really needs it, right? Stop laughing, this is serious. So in the end, everything in this entire town has changed, and yet somehow absolutely everything is still exactly the fucking same. Ars gratia artis. Words to live by. Art for art's sake are words that no longer contain meaning as a motto for MGM. Way back in the beginning of this piece, I proposed a question. How do you keep a business alive for 100 years? What is art when 100 years passed and you systemically, through leadership cabals, give up on every virtue you ever held dear? I think it's important to understand what the industry, since its inception, has always looked like. The gold rush that really, truly never ended. It's right there on the logo. And at the end of the day, we're just on the other side of the mountain now. That, according to me, is the 100-year history of Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. A studio formed to serve artists ultimately turned into something that does not. Maybe this whole piece could have been summed up thusly. Maybe, perhaps, billionaires shouldn't run film studios because the last thing they will ever care about is the films. Then again, maybe that's just the story of life. Oh, hello. It's nice to see you. We've been struggling quite a bit with our uploads to YouTube getting blocked worldwide lately. And wouldn't you know it, we weren't even actually sure if this video would make it on this platform or not. But lucky for us, and for you, we're also on Nebula. As Nebula first creators, all of our uploads come out on Nebula a month early. Oh, okay, except for this one. The whole 100-year anniversary thing was kind of you get it. Nebula is a streaming platform made by and for creators, as a place we can create the art we want the way we intended. Nebula is home to exclusives like Lindsay Ellis's Ballad of John and Yoko, which dives extremely deep into the relationship of John and Yoko and what made them tick as people. We're even helping creators produce their dream projects they wouldn't otherwise be able to make, like Jesse Gender's Identities and Dracula's Ex-Girlfriend by Abby Thorne, both coming later this year. But none of this would be possible without our fans who support us and other creators like us. So if you want to join a platform that's pushing entertainment forward and enabling us to make things we never would have been able to before, come support Filmjoy on Nebula and get access to all of our videos before they hit YouTube, as well as ad-free access to videos from hundreds of other creators, tons of original content, and access to Nebula classes. In addition to annual memberships, we're currently offering lifetime subscriptions for only $300. Pay once and get access to Nebula for as long as both you and Nebula exist. We'd love to see you there, so visit our link in the description to get started. Thank you so much for coming on this extremely strange and weird journey with us. We will see you next time.